So, for my persuasive speech, I wanted to talk about models and like fashion runway models and the regulations that they have and that they don't have. And I have my roommate Allie listening to my speech. So, the main issues are really that young girls have a completely false idea of what beauty is. They look at a super thin model and that's what they define as beauty, and that's just false. Lots of body shaming, racism, and feeling old while they're still young is something that these models experience. I watched some interview with a model. She's 25 years old and she showed up for a model casting and she said all these girls must have been 15, 16, 17, and she just lost all her self-worth because she was like, well, I'm 25 and I'm here for the same casting. The main idea that people have of models is white, tall, and thin, which is something that, especially in today's society, really needs to be changed. Young kids at the age of 14 are portrayed much older than they are. A lot of actual, like, high-end lingerie shoots that you see, a lot of that is girls that are 14 years old, don't even have their period yet, and they're portrayed so much older, and for a lot of them, it's the first time putting on lingerie or putting on a bikini and things like that. It just isn't right. There's a huge craze for the younger look. They're taking it way too far. Also, there was another interview with a plus-size model who said plus size don't usually get invited into fashion weeks, and they're often very objectified. There was a lot of things that models said that were just not okay in the way that they were touched or treated during shoots. They were literally touched like they were objects. And models used to be silent for so long because modeling was such like an unspoken industry. Nobody wanted to talk about what really went on. And finally they've had enough and they're speaking up, and so are other people who aren't even models but are in the industry. So these are some words from some models. I saw an article in the New York Times that had probably 6 or 8 various different models. All looked completely different. Some were like, the ordinary model that you picture in your head. They were all very unique and diverse models, and they still all had the same thing to say. So they said they were not treated like humans. If they want you to look a certain way, they will come up and they will touch you. Just, they're very inappropriate and not treated right. One even said that one of her directors later got arrested for pedophilia, and she had worked with him before, and many other young girls. They talk about the model's bodies in front of them. A model will be standing right there, and the people working will be talking about what their body looks like directly in front of them. One model even said she was in a big conference meeting. They're talking about how wide her hips were, and so everyone knew, and so everyone had to be aware and to try and work with that. One girl showed up to a shoot. She was not told it was a topless shoot, and she was forced to do it. Extremely uncomfortable because she couldn't leave. She was with the casting people, and I think there's legal things about her leaving if she's already signed to do that shoot. There's a strange obsession with the extreme youth, and it's just really be taking too far. One girl showed up to a shoot that was like an SMS inspired shoot. She was 16. More words from the models. Models feel old after 25 and they're losing self-worth, like I had mentioned before. It's hard for them to have self-love when everyone around them is just constantly criticizing their bodies. And a lot of models now have realized how important it is to be a role model, because these young girls are coming up to them being like, how can I get a job like you? How can I do that? And they want to explain to them that that's not what you want to do. And many of them deal with a lot of eating disorders. So within this New York Times article that I read, there was an interesting part, and it says in February, it was during Paris Fashion Week, a group of very high-profile models like Jordan Dunn, Eddie Campbell, Leomi Anderson, Candace Swanepoel, and Joan Smalls voiced their support for James Scully, who's a casting director, and he had taken to Instagram to condemn 2 colleagues for what they had done, and what they had done was keep models in an unlit stairwell for several hours, and he just wasn't okay with that, and he finally had to voice his opinion on social media, which of course blew up, because since it was such a silent industry and now someone's finally speaking up, it just blew up. And so after this publicity, many other models have started coming out into light to share how they're truly abused get unfair payment and bad working conditions. One model was doing a shoot for Louis Vuitton. She was told she could only consume water for 24 hours before her shoot. She wasn't allowed to eat anything or drink anything else. And so there was a couple girls in that article, so I'm going to share you a little bit about their stories and what they talked about, their personal experience. So one girl, her name is Precious Lee, and she had to change her name to Victoria Lee for 3 years because her name was too black. They needed her to have a white name, and she did it. They didn't care about her past experience modeling for Macy's or Nordstrom. They only really cared that she was black. She was one interview she was at, they're like, you're really pretty, but you're black. So they just couldn't put those two things in the same category, which is something she's really trying to get people to understand can be in the same category. And she often notices that when she is on set, if she does get a job, she will be either the only black person there on set or one of the very few. This other girl, directors wanted her hips smaller. She wasn't even allowed to eat a bag of chips. And they wanted her on a 700-calorie diet, and she was only 14 at the time, and she would see girls not eat for 2 days at the age of 14 just for lingerie shoots. And then I watched this TED Talk with Cameron Russell, who walked out in a skin-tight dress, looking all glamorous, like she just like in her model state. And then she started talking, and then she stopped, and then she instantly began to put on a big skirt that went all the way to the floor, a big sweater, and she took off her heels. And she was like, notice how I could change in 6 seconds and could change what you thought of me in 6 seconds. She said her image that's shown is not how she looks in real life, and this is something she really wants to be bringing to the light because she has so many young girls coming and asking her questions, and she just wants to be able to be honest and give the truth. She said most models are really insecure about how they look, and she really just doesn't know how to tell girls to become a model, because when girls ask her, she wants to tell them, be my boss. She was like, you could be my CEO. Like, why do you want to just be a model? You could be the president of the United States. Those were some examples that she gave. So she just talked about how questions she's asked she can't always answer truthfully, and now with all these models coming out, she finally is just telling it like it is. And these are pictures of her. So one is with her grandma. That shoot was taken on the same day. It was the first time she had ever worn a bikini. She didn't have her period yet, she said. And then the one in the bottom corner, that was also the same day. And then about unfair pay, I found an article on CNN. Most model agencies get 10% of models' pay. Clients have to pay another 10%, and they're charged with so many fees that they're not told about beforehand. Thousands are being taken from these models. They look at bills and truly don't know what the fees are. I watched some video of some model, and she had these huge sheets of all her bills and all these little charges being taken out, and some of them she could read what they are. She's like, oh, I got my hair done, but what's the 50 charges between that and the time I got food? Having so much money taken from them, and all they want is receipts to see where this money's going. For example, Canadian model Emily Fox says she remembers paying around $50 a night to stay in a New York City model apartment during Fashion Week, and 3 months that followed. As a result, she ended up owing her agency as much as $4,500 for housing alone. She worked shows where she would only get paid in clothes. And then another model, Marcelle Almont, says her agency, MC2, charged her up to $1,850 a month to stay in a 2-bedroom Miami model apartment that fit 9 people, with beds and a couch. In a proposed class action lawsuit against many of the big agencies, Almont alleges that similar units in the same building currently rented for $2,900 to $3,300 a month, suggesting the agency made a profit of almost $14,000 by marking them up and charging them too much. So in France, they do have much better laws that they actually just recently created. So models are now required to have a medical certificate valid for up to 2 years, confirming their general physical well-being and the fact that they're not excessively underweight. The much debated body mass index, or BMI, a measurement who is really important with health and is something to definitely take into account. with the way one looks, it's definitely going to be part of the consideration for models over 16. And those who do not disclose image retouching subject are subject to a fine of 37,500 euros or more than 41,000. Employing a model without health requirements and a certificate carries a fine of 75,000 and 6 months in jail, which are huge fines that the U.S. does not have but need. Also for underage, so James Scully, who's a casting director for designers like Tom Ford, he's also the guy that came forward earlier that I talked about. This year I saw over 350 girls, and I only saw 3 that were under 18. He calculates that as many as 60% of models have been under 18 in previous years. Also, a 14-year-old Russian model passed away recently from being overworked. She had 16 different jobs in her 2-month stay at China. She was so overworked, she was shaking, she didn't eat enough, and she passed, which is why some of these laws got created, because we don't have these laws in the U.S. and need them. In conclusion, with all these big-name models and casting directors coming out, finally voicing their opinion on the silent industry, it's time they're finally making a change, and they want views on body image, racism, pay, and abuse to be changed.